all be able to see a pretty ordinary PowerPoint presentation. I have a presentation here that has 23 slides, as it says here. There's a variety of things with pictures, with smart art, with graphs, with bullet points and so forth. So we're going to talk about different ways to make it a little bit more exciting when you give a presentation, so those people in the back row aren't snoozing but are watching. It's pretty easy to get bored and kind of tune out when you just have bullet points after bullet points. So we're going to try and make them a little more interesting. So the number one feature that I want to talk about is creating transitions. So if I were to run the PowerPoint presentation as it is now, which is pretty plain vanilla with nothing animated, each time I click or hit an enter key, the next slide shows. So there's no transition between the slides except for one, popping up where the other one was. So transitions mean, and up on the toolbar, you'll see a transitions, on the ribbon, you'll see a transitions tab. And you can create transitions, which creates a little movement between the slides. I would recommend, although you can do it when it's in the normal view, I would recommend going to the slide sorter view, which you can get on the lower right on the status bar, or you can go to the view tab and pick slide sorter over there, because that lets you see a thumbnail sketch of all of your slides, and it's a little easier to pick them out. So to do a transition, I would again go to transitions, click on a slide so it's selected, and then simply select whatever transition you want. For instance, I'm just going to click a white, and you can see a little demo of it over here. And I'm going to pick a few different transitions so that you can get an idea of what they do, although certainly in a real presentation, you would not want every slide to have a different transition. You would make people crazy. So I'm also going to pick some really interesting ones, shall we say, which you probably would not want to use in a business presentation, but it's interesting to see what they have come up with. So I'm just going to do a few of them, and then you can see. You see what I mean about probably not wanting to use those. A little too vivid, a little too much time it takes, and so forth. So to give you an idea of what these transitions, so I did the first 8. So I'm going to start with slide number 1, and I'm just going to run the slideshow so you can see. So that one's a pretty nice one. And here, the first few I used were pretty simple ones. And, but this is, origami is a little much, and honeycomb. And you certainly wouldn't want to use different ones on every slide. So I have a suggestion. Still working on some of these. Okay, so that's it. Those are the first 8. So let's say you wanted to do a simple transition on all of them. So all you'd have to do is select all the slides. Control A selects everything, as it does in most programs. And let's say we want to do a uncover. So it's just uncovering. And it's going to do that to all of them. Now, sometimes to give it a little bit more variation, you might want to take the even slides and uncover them from left to right, and the odd slides and do it from right to left. So here I'm going to unselect, and then maybe I'll select just the even ones. So I'm holding my control key so I can select 2, 4, 6, 8. I'll just do it for the first few. And they're all uncover, but instead of, okay, go to the effect options. And instead of uncovering from the right, which is the default, I'm going to say uncover those from the left. So we have a little bit of different movement. I'm going to go to the first slide and then run the slideshow. And then when I click, that one uncovers to one side and the other side and one side and the other side, etc. So it's not too overwhelming or confusing visually, and yet you have a little bit more variation. So that's the way you can work with that. And you can see that when you look at all of them, the first grouping they say are subtle, and those are fairly subtle. And then when you get down to the exciting ones, things like the honeycomb and the vortex and the glitter, those are probably a bit much, maybe to use on one dramatic slide, but certainly not to use on all of them. So if we want, since we're going to work with other animation features, I'm going to take off all of the animation. So I'm going to do Control A, and then I'm just going to hit none, so that we don't have to wait for the animation to go when we look at other features. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to open up the title slide. And one of the things you might want to do is, instead of this whole slide just appearing, you might want to take this logo, for instance, and have the logo animated. So I'm picking animations. A lot of these are similar to the transitions, but they're working on parts of the slide, not the whole slide. So I might want to say fly in, and notice it flew in from the bottom, but many of them have options, effect options, not every single one, but many. And if I wanted to fly in from the left or from the top or whatever, I can indicate that. And then I might want to pick the title. This is actually the title. And I might want to fly that in perhaps from the right to make it a little bit different. Okay, and then I could also, and notice that the program is numbering the different transitions. Now I can pick the presenter's name, and I can, let's say I want to make, I'm going to float that in, so a little bit different. So I have not set any timing, so I'm going to be in charge of when each of these items appear. So and by clicking my mouse or hitting the enter key. So when I click the first time, we're going to have the logo come in. When I click the second time, the title comes in, and then the third time, the name of the presenter comes in. Okay, if I wanted to, I could set timings on this. I could say for the second one that I want it to happen, instead of just when I click, after the previous. And I can do the same thing with the third one. I can say, instead of on click, after previous. And so then if I run this, I'm just going to click to start it, and now I'm not touching anything, and the others come in automatically. So you can set timings, and those timings can be set in terms of how long they take and whether there's a delay or not. So there's all sorts of options you can do with that. To have the most control over your animations, you can open up what's called the animation pane. And then each of these numbered animations will appear on the side. And when you click on one of them, you'll have a drop down which has all sorts of different options. And if you want to remove the animation, which is what I'm going to do now, you can remove the animation. Now, if I wanted to animate all of the titles in my presentation the same way, which seems logical because that would be uniform, instead of having to do it to each of 20 or 40 slides, I can do that on the master slide. So I'm going to go to the view, and I'm going to go to this, what they call a slide master. And if you go to all the way to the top and the overall master, and you click into the title, and then you animate that title with, let's say, a fly in, just to make it easy. Then I might be able to, I should be able to illustrate this. There's the, so each time, now I didn't set a timing or say after the previous, so I'm clicking to get each one to come in, but you can see that any slide with a title is going to use that animation. Now, if I don't want that animation to slow us down when I'm showing you other animation features, I'm going to go back to the slide master. Okay, where am I here? Lost sight of that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the slide master. And I'm going to delete that animation for now, because otherwise every time we show a slide, I'm going to remove it. Okay, and then I'm going to close out of that master view. Okay, so we're back to no animations. And I think I want to also show you, if we go to, for instance, a slide with a picture on it, that we can animate pictures as well. So again, we can just select it, go to animations, and we have these easy ones with wipe and float in and so forth. And we also have some more exciting ones, like for instance, a spin. And you can even tell it how many times you want to spin, half a spin, full spin, 2 spins, and so forth. You could really make people dizzy if you want to. So that's of interest, but I want to point out that you have entrance animations, which is our most common way to say, okay, this is how this picture or this text is going to come in. You have emphasis animations. You can't apply more than one, so either entrance or emphasis or exit. So if I decide I'm going to do an exit animation, then when I run the slideshow, it appears, it's overridden my entrance, but when I click, that's the exit. So you can do either an entrance or an exit or an emphasis. So if I wanted to do an emphasis like a grow shrink, it's pretty interesting. If I run the slideshow, again, it's going to appear, and when I click, it's going to do this grow thing. Okay. So that's a little bit about how we can work with pictures. Here's another picture, another example, and I can perhaps do something like a zoom, so it zooms in, and there are also options, although this one's pretty from the, from the center or from the center of the picture, or from the center of the slide, so that's pretty easy. And let's say we wanted to do something a little bit different. And I'm going to open up a slide that just has 3 ovals. And instead of just having them spin or open up, whatever, I want to use something called motion paths. And so if I select one and click down, you'll see you have the typical entrance, emphasis, exit, but I also have motion paths here. And motion paths literally let me create a motion like a triangle. And that's how that particular object, I have to close it each one, or it won't let me do the next one. Okay, so I need to go back and go to motion path. And let's say I pick a heart. All right, and then I'll do the last one here, and I'll go to motion paths, and I'll move it over so we can see it this time. And let's say I do a curvy right. Okay, and again, I am not setting timings here, but I could. So if I wanted to say the second one is going to happen after the previous, and the third one is going to happen after the previous, so I'm just going to need to click for the first one. So if I run the slideshow from here and I click, there goes the first one. Now I'm not touching the mouse or the keyboard, and the other ones are going, and I could have built-in delays or whatever, timing, how long it takes, and so forth. So you have those motion paths, which might be interesting in something like a flow chart to show what direction things are going or whatever. So it's just more ways that you can work with your animation. And you can also add sound to some of these. So we'll check that out with the next one. So I'm going to go up and pick a slide that has some bullets on it. And this is something that a lot of people do like to do, and that is to have the bulleted slides come in one at a time. And that is actually the default here. So if I want to add an animation here, typically it's a fly in or a float in. And notice it's showing us a preview of how it would do it one item at a time. And that's fine. So if I run the slideshow, oh, I had that little grow thing in there. And then I'll click, and so I didn't build in any timing, so I'm clicking each time I want the next slide to come in. Okay, let me take this out so we don't have to have that. And the other thing I could do is I could go to timing, and I could say on after previous. And I could also, effect, sound. I wanted to show you a little bit of sound. So I could also do something like applause. And since I'm not clicking because I said after previous, so I just started it with the first one. So you might want to ease up on the sound a little, but in some instances it's helpful. And again, I'm going to remove it so we don't have to wait for that to happen if we're doing other things. Okay, so that works pretty easily, and the default is to bring in one paragraph at a time. But if we go down to a slide that has multiple bulleted multiple level bullets, like this one, you might not, if we simply say animate this by a fly-in, what's going to happen when I run that, did that actually take effect? No, I don't think so. Okay. I thought I did that. Okay, let's try it again. Fly in, yeah. Okay, so notice what's going to happen is each first level bullet is going to bring in the second level bullets. And that may be what you want, but it might not be. So if you wanted to be able to bring in each bullet one at a time, you need to tell it by going to the different effect options and going to text animation. And instead of by first level, you want to say second level in this case. And usually you won't have more than 2 levels or it'll get too small for people to really see it. So now notice the little sample, the preview is showing you one at a time. But here, you probably would not want to set timing here. So we're going to talk about your contracts for 1.2 million, and then you're going to say, okay, the first one is the Johnson project for 750,000, and the second one is the Smith project, et cetera. And you have the opportunity to bring in each bullet as you want to discuss it. And another thing that you might want to do, again, with different options, you can of course set timing, but you probably want to do this on your own. Another thing you can do is you can set dimming it or even making it disappear, but I'm going to dim it to a lighter color after and show you what I mean. Okay, it's hard to see that. Let's run the presentation. Okay, so you bring in the first one and it's obviously bold and you can see what you're talking about. When you click for the second one, the first one dims out. So you're directing people's attention to exactly what you're talking about. So you can do that. I could even dim it to white so it would disappear completely. So that's sometimes people want to direct your attention a little bit more clearly, and that's another way to do that. Okay, so that's a little bit about bullets text. Let's talk about chart animation. That is very dramatic because now, of course, the whole chart would just appear, and that's how we usually do it. So what we might want to do is say we want to add animation, and that would typically be a fly-in or a float-in. And if I run the slideshow, the whole chart, when I click, because I didn't set any timing, is going to just come in by itself. Not all that exciting. So what you might want to do is go to this effect options, and instead of as one object, tell it to come in by series. So you see what's happening here. When I run the slideshow, first the background of the chart comes in, and then when I'm ready to say, well, let's say how the North division is doing, and when I click, all of the North bars come in, and then let's see how the West is doing, etc. So I can bring them in with a click whenever I want to. That's pretty dramatic. And the alternative, similar but a little different in options, is to do it by category. So that I can say, let's look at the first quarter, let's look at the second quarter, let's see the background of the chart, and then I can bring in the first quarter and talk about the comparisons, and then I can bring in the second quarter, etc. If I want to, I can even bring it in bar by bar, but that would probably be a bit too tedious, but that is a way to do that. And likewise, if I had a pie chart that I wanted to animate to make it a little bit more interesting, let's say I want to use something like random bars, just to make something a little different. And instead of having it all come in together, again, I can go to the effect option and say by category. So when I run the slideshow, again, here's my background of the chart. I'm talking about the North and then talking about the West, etc. So I'm clicking to bring it in, or I could set a timing to have it come in after a second or two in each case. So those are some examples of how you can work with charts to make them a lot more interesting to your audience. Let's go to another interesting facet. This is smart art, and hopefully you guys are familiar with what smart art is. You get to smart art by inserting smart art, and gives you a bunch of different ways to bring in your information in a more interesting way other than just bulleted text or whatever. So I'm going to take the Smart Art here as an example, and I'm going to say I want to animate that. And again, I'm going to use random bars, and instead of doing it all together, I am going to say one by one. So again, I would be able to say, here are my key differentiators, wide network, and then when I click, market knowledge, and then when I click, quick turnaround, etc. So I would have the option of bringing them in when I want to talk about them. Another example of Smart Art, kind of cool, this one, kind of an arrow. And what I can do here is animate this with a zoom, which kind of looks nice. And again, instead of having it all zoom in together, one by one. So again, I can say, here's my goals, and here's the first goal, and then I can discuss that, and then the second, and I'm just clicking, or you could put it on a timer if you want to.
Ronnie, where is Smart Art? Like, so this isn't just a picture.
No, this is not just a picture. If I were to say, let's say I want to insert, let's say I want to add a new slide. And one of the slide things, I can either pick Smart Art over here, but on any slide, you can go to Insert, and you can say Smart Art. And then you can pick, let's say, something like, they have them by list. So this would be a more interesting way to put in a list rather than bulleted. They have it by process, if you have something that leads from one thing to the next. They have cycle. So they're all different ways. Hierarchy, this would be like an org chart type thing, or relationships. So very commonly it's a list, and then you pick which style list you want, and then you can type in your text. So I'll just, type in some whatever, that sort of thing, and you can have your sub-bullets and so forth, or you can take a bulleted text and actually turn it into Smart Art. So it's very flexible and very, so this is an example of something that was done with Smart Art, as is this. So we could take this and we could say we want to animate this, and we want to do a float in. And instead of floating it all in together, we want to float it in one level at a time. Or we want to float it in one by one. Oh, it's interesting that it's doing vertical instead of horizontal, yeah. Which I would assume would be the thing, but you can modify it, of course. So those are some examples of how we can animate things. So just about anything you could add sound, we could add motion paths, we can add timing, and we can animate text like headings and subheadings, or bullets, graphs, pictures, Smart Art. So pretty much, and of course the transitions, don't forget about transitions. They kind of make your slideshow a little bit more interesting.
Great.
So any questions?
Yeah, we're open for questions. There's a chat section in the application. So if you could just click on chat, and then you could say, hey, I got a question for you. If not, we're going to be posting this online. You can review it at a later time. It's going to be on uscomputer.com. And
yeah, and I'll put a link on computertrainingsolutions.biz. I have a monthly newsletter that also provides a monthly tip. So if you want to sign up for that, go to computertrainingsolutions.biz, and you can do that.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Stay warm and have a nice day.
Okay.